All right, so today we're going to talk about factoring. It's going to be something very important for this Unit 3 stuff when we work at solving quadratics and polynomials, graphing quadratics and polynomials. It's going to help us find a lot of things. So this is kind of a skill you're going to need in order to do some of the standards in this unit. Okay? So there's going to be two types of factoring we're going to look at. The first one is going to be looking for something called a common monomial to pull out. A common term between each of the terms in there. So we're going to look at a couple examples that look like that. So if I've got 4x plus 2, what I'm looking for is each term 4x and 2, is there a common variable between the two of them or a common factor or number that they both share? And both 4 and 2 are divisible by 2. So what I can do is I can factor that 2 out. And basically I'm using division to do that. So I'm going to pull a 2 out. I want to think about 4x divided by 2. Well, 4 divided by 2 is 2. And I still have the x. So I'm left with 2x. And you can kind of check 2 times 2x is 4x. And then when I divide 2 by 2, I'm left with 1. So factoring this, 4x plus 2, pull out a 2. Left with 2x plus 1, and again, check, multiply it out, distribute it. 2 times 2x is 4x, 2 times 1 is 2. Again, it kind of checks. Okay, so again, that's one kind of idea, pulling out a common monomial. Okay, we're going to look at a second example. Let's factor 6x squared plus 4x. Okay. Again, when I look at 6 and 4, both are divisible by 2, so I can factor out a 2. But also both x squared and x contain 1x. Okay, you can only pull out what they have in common. So I'm going to factor out an x. Again, when I divide, 6x squared divided by 2x, 6 divided by 2 is 3. X squared divided by x, I can kind of cancel 1x out. That's going to leave me with an x. Plus 4x divided by 2x, 4 divided by 2 is 2, and x divided by x, the x's cancel. So that's what I get 2x times the quantity 3x plus 2, again check, 2x times 3x, 2 times 3 is my 6, x times x is x squared, and then distribute 2x times 2, 2 times 2 is 4, and then bring the x along. So that's a common monomial. That's really one of the things you want to do even when you're doing tougher problems. You want to look at each term, is there something common I could pull out? Okay, but I have to be able to pull it out from all terms. Okay, and here there's just 2 terms. You might have problems that have 3 or more terms, and so you want to look, is there something common between every single term in the expression that I can factor out? Okay, so that's kind of one idea that we're looking at. The second kind of common idea of factoring is to turn something into kind of 2 parentheses. Okay? I'm going to kind of start and go backwards to give you an example of where we're coming from here. Okay? So if I had something like x plus 3 times 2x plus 1, hopefully remember to expand this means to basically multiply this out. So I'm going to take x times 2x, which is 2x squared, and then x times 1 is 1x. And then I move on to the 3 times 2x is 6x, and then 3 times 1 is 3. Okay. Then I can combine some like terms and get 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. Okay? So our goal for factoring is actually we're going to start here and work backwards. So our goal when we look at these problems is we're going to give you kind of a quadratic to try to factor, and our goal is to end up with 2 parentheses that if I multiply them out, if I expanded them back out, I would end up with the expanded form. Okay? So expanding goes like this, factoring goes backwards. Okay? And again, you're going to see this as a very important tool that we're going to use. All right, so first example we're going to look at is 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. Okay. So the idea here, we're going to give you some kind of shortcuts or ways to kind of do this. Okay. What I want to look for is I want to first take my a and c values. If I have a general quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c, so this is sort of my general form. What I want to do is I want to multiply the a and c together. And that's what we call our product. So our product is a times c, and then our sum is going to be the b value. Okay? So this is something we're going to need to do with each of these problems to factor, is we're going to multiply the a and c together, and then we're going to copy down the b value. Be very careful about the signs. If this was a minus in here, then the b number would be negative. Okay? Now once we do that, what we're going to search for is we're going to search for two numbers that multiply to whatever a times c is and add to b. Okay? And that's going to help us kind of decide how to factor this. So we're going to start that process here. So my product is going to be 2 times 1, which is the number 2. And my sum is going to be the b value, or the number 3. Okay. So here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 2 and add to 3. Okay. Well, this is a pretty easy one to start off with, because the only way to multiply to 2 is either 1 times 2 or negative 1 times negative 2. So my numbers either need to be both positive or both negative. If I want to add to a positive 3, both numbers have to be positive. Okay, so my kind of winning numbers are going to be 1 and 2. Because 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 plus 2 is 3. Okay? How we're going to use those numbers is we're actually going to do what we call split the middle term. We're going to split the 3x into 1x and 2x. So this is going to look like this. 2x squared plus, doesn't matter which one you go, since this one's 2, I'm going to kind of keep the 2 with it, it's a little bit easier. So plus 2x, then plus 1x, and then plus 1. So all I've done, if you notice, is I've taken this 3x, which is the middle term, and split it into an equivalent form. 3x is the same as 2x plus 1x. Okay, it would add to the same when I combine like terms. Just like you saw when we expanded, after we kind of distributed through, we had to combine the middle terms. So this is kind of that second step, that intermediate step that I've got the expanded out piece. 4 terms before I condense them into 3 terms in the middle. All right, so there's sort of my first step. My next step now is to group. So what we're going to do is we're going to group the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. So I've grouped 2x squared plus 2x together and 1x plus 1 together. Okay? Now this actually comes back to what we were just working on, which is looking for something common to factor out. Well, when I look at 2x squared and 2x, both are divisible by 2, and both contain at least 1x. Okay, so I'm going to factor out 2x. And when I factor 2x out, I'm left with x plus, and 2x divided by 2x is 1. So again, kind of doing what we did just a minute ago with factoring out that common monomial. Kind of looks like a distributive property. And then the second one, I've got 1x plus 1. Well, it doesn't really appear that there's a whole lot that divides into it, but 1 will. Okay, so I'm going to have to at least pull out a 1. And then 1x divided by 1, I'm still left with 1x or just x. And 1 divided by 1 is 1. Now here's sort of a little test. If these two parentheses are not identical, we screwed up somewhere. Okay? Since they are identical, we're almost done to our final answer. What we're going to do is we're going to have two parentheses. One of the parentheses is going to be that common parenthesis. So I got x plus 1. And the second parenthesis is formed by what we factored out. 2x and the plus 1. And there we go. There's our answer. 2x squared plus 3x plus 1 factors into x plus 1 times 2x plus 1. Again, you could distribute, expand this out, and make sure that you do end up with 2x squared plus 3x plus 1. All right, let's look at a couple more examples. We're going to look at 5x squared minus 7x minus 6. Okay? So first thing I'm going to look for is that product, sum, and numbers. Okay? So again, to find the product, I'm going to take A times C. So 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. My sum is the B value, which is negative 7. All right, so now this is where it gets a little tricky. To find the two numbers to split negative 7 up into, okay, to split the middle term, I need to find two numbers that multiply to negative 30, but also add to negative 7. So what I want to do is, if I can't think of this in my head, I want to kind of list out all the ways to multiply to negative 30. Well, that's 1, and let's just start off with 30. So 1 and 30, 2 and 15, so 1 times 30 is 30, 2 times 15 is 30, 3 times 10, 4, nope, 4 doesn't go into 30, 5, yep, 5 and 6. And then I'd be at 6, and I'd be kind of flipping and going back the other way. So these are going to be the 4 different ways I could factor 30. Okay? Now, here's a little trick to this. I needed to multiply to negative 30. So therefore, one of the two numbers in each of the pairs has to be negative. To determine which one is negative, I look at what they have to add to. Okay? If the two numbers add to a negative, the bigger number has to be the negative one. So I'm going to put a negative on each of the larger numbers in my grouping. And now my goal is to find the right one that adds to negative 7. Well, 1 in negative 30 is negative 29. Nope. 2 in negative 15, negative 13. Nope. 3 in negative 10. Yes, there it is. There's my winning numbers, 3 and negative 10. So 3 times negative 10 multiplies to negative 30, and 3 plus negative 10 adds to negative 7. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split that middle term. So I get 5x squared. I'm going to split my middle term into a 3x and a negative 10x. Again, for ease of purposes, I notice that negative 10 has a little bit more in common with the 5 than a 3 does. So I'm going to write minus 10x. Then I have to put the other one, plus 3x, and carry down the minus 6. So I have 5x squared minus 10x plus 3x minus 6. Now I'm going to group the first two terms, look for something common to take out. Group the last two. 5 and negative 10 have a 5 in common. And x squared and x have an x in common. So I have 5x. And when I pull a 5x out, 5x squared divided by 5x, I'm left over with an x. Negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. And the x's will cancel. So I have 5x times x minus 2. Second one, 3x and negative 6 have a 3 in common. So I'm going to pull out a positive 3. Little trick, if this first number in the second parenthesis is negative, I want to pull a negative out. I want to make that a negative number out in front. All right, so when I pull out a 3, 3x divided by 3 leaves me with x. That's matching up. It's a good start. And then negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted to have happen. My two parentheses were the same. Again, if they're not, you screwed up somewhere. Either it's not factorable, or you chose the wrong numbers here, or you did some bad math there. Now your job is to kind of go back and figure it out, or obviously call one of us over to get some help, call your teacher over and kind of figure out where you kind of made a mistake. But there's a check right there. Okay? All right, so then my answer is going to be x minus 2, the kind of common parenthesis that they shared. And then the second parenthesis is going to be what was factored out, which was 5x and a positive 3. All right, so again, I could expand this, take x times 5x, 5x squared, x times 3, there's my 3x, negative 2 times 5x, there's my negative 10x, and negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. So again, checked it. There's my answer. That's how I factor 5x squared minus 7x minus 6. Okay? I'll do one more example for you. All right, so the last example we're going to do is x squared minus 4x plus 3. Now, you notice a slight difference here is that there's not a number or a coefficient in front of the x squared. Remember, that implies that there's the number 1 there. Okay? So when I find my product, remember it's a times c, so it's 1, even though it's not there. You can think about it being a 1, write it in there if that helps. So 1 times 3 is 3, and my sum is negative 4. So again, a pretty easy one again, because there's only one way to multiply to 3. 1 times 3. And again, we're only really looking at integer values here. We're not going to have any fractions to deal with. So my two numbers have to be 1 and 3, but they have to add to negative 4. Okay? If the product is positive, you know both numbers are positive or both numbers are negative. But since they add to a negative, very simply both are negative. Okay, so my two numbers are negative 1 and negative 3. So again, I'm going to use that to split my middle term. So I get x squared. And again, I'm going to put the 1, kind of makes more sense to go with the x. So minus 1x minus 3x, and then drop down the plus 3. And now again, group the first two, group the last two. X squared and x, or x squared and minus 1x, I can pull out an x. Pulling an x or factoring an x from x squared leaves me with x. Negative 1x divided by x leaves me with negative 1. Here's that example I was talking about. So I've got a negative 3x plus 3. Both are divisible by 3, but since the first term is negative, I want to pull out that negative. So it's going to be negative 3. And negative 3x divided by negative 3, the negatives cancel, leaving with a positive x. Again, matching up. And positive 3 divided by negative 3 is a negative 1. Again, there's my built-in check spot. Yep, they're the same. I feel pretty confident about moving forward. If not, get some help. All right, so then our final answer is going to be x minus 1, the common parenthesis, and then the factors that we pulled out make the second parenthesis. Again, really what we're doing here mathematically is we're factoring an x minus 1 out again, because that's actually what's common between these two terms, factoring that out, and then leaving what's left over, which would be the x minus 3 to make the second parenthesis. Okay. All right, so that's how you factor. Again, you're going to be using this throughout this unit. So you really want to make sure that you can factor so that you're successful on some of the solving and graphing, finding zeros, that type of stuff for our Unit 3 stuff.